I never thought humiliation could come wrapped in silk and champagne. But there I was, sitting in the third row at my younger sister's wedding, wearing the only formal dress I owned, doing my best to disappear into a room full of polished strangers, who all seemed to sparkle brighter than me. My son Luca was beside me in his little suit, swinging his legs under the table with pride. He was only 8, and I had stretched 2 paychecks to buy that outfit. He thought today would make us feel like part of the family again. Maybe in some fragile part of me, I hoped for the same. Vivian floated through the day like she always did, like she was born under a spotlight that never once dimmed. She had the kind of presence that people adored, beautiful, charming, magnetic, especially to our mother. Vivian got the praise, I got the comparisons. She got the attention, I learned how to survive in the shadows. Still, I smiled. I clapped when they kissed. I forced my voice steady when people asked, "And you're the older sister. You don't look like you have an 8-year-old." I laughed politely as though I belonged there. But then came the speeches. The best man's toast was harmless. A few tired jokes, a few cheers. I expected Vivian's words to be glowing and sentimental, a sweet ode to love, maybe even a kind acknowledgement of family. I even raised my glass, believing for a fleeting second that my sister might extend kindness toward me. Instead, she smiled with that polished confidence of hers and said, "I want to say something special about my big sister. She's always been such a role model, a single mom, strong, independent, and clearly unwanted by anyone else." The room erupted in laughter. I felt my stomach drop, my pulse hammer in my ears. At first I thought I had misheard her, but no, she kept smiling, basking in the cruelty of her words. The laughter grew louder, sharper, a sound that cut not just into me, but through me. And then my own mother's voice. She raised her glass and added loudly, "She's a used product, but hey, she still looks good for her age." More laughter. This time it pierced deeper. I froze in my chair, my fingers digging into the napkin like it could anchor me against the tidal wave of shame. My face burned. My heart screamed to flee. But beside me, Luca tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Mama, why did she say that about you?" That broke me. Not the words, not the laughter, but the confusion in my son's eyes, trying to understand why his mother, his safe place, his protector, was being mocked by her own family. I wanted to leave. I wanted to grab his hand, walk out, and never look back. But something in me hesitated, something deeper than pride. A desperate need to hold myself together for him. My voice wouldn't come. My legs shook under the table. I was paralyzed between the instinct to run and the urge to fight back. And then the sound of a chair scraping against the polished floor. Callum, the groom, Vivian's perfect fiancé, rose from his seat. He didn't look amused. He didn't even glance at her. His eyes locked on mine, steady and unflinching, and the entire room fell into silence. In that moment, I knew something was about to happen. Not a rescue, not a polite correction, something bigger, a reckoning. I've always been painted as the family's failure, the black sheep. My name is Lara. I'm 34 and I live with my son in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. I work mornings at a cafe and nights at a hotel front desk. My life isn't glamorous, but it's mine. I make pancakes for Luca on Saturdays. I sew patches into his jeans. He tells me I'm his superhero and that's all I need. But to my family, that's never been enough. To them, I'm not strength, I'm shame. When I got pregnant at 25, abandoned by the man who swore he'd stay, they didn't ask questions. They offered no help, no love, just silence, just judgment. Still deep down I kept hoping one day they'd see me as more than a mistake. That's why I said yes to this wedding, even though my name was spelled wrong on the RSVP card, even though I had to rent my dress and do my own hair. I told myself it was for closure, that maybe, just maybe, this was their way of extending an olive branch. Instead, here I was humiliated in front of strangers, mocked by my sister and gutted by my mother, my son watching every second. And yet when Callum stood, the entire air shifted. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't letting it slide. He wasn't pretending. He was about to shatter the perfect fairy tale my family had wrapped themselves in. The moment Callum rose to his feet, the laughter died. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white as he gripped the microphone Vivian had so smugly held only seconds before. He didn't glance at her, not once. His gaze was pinned on me as though he was the only one in the room who saw me. Not as a joke, not as a stain on the family name, but as a human being who had just been gutted in front of her child. "Lara, don't go," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying through the silence like a thunderclap. My chair was already half pushed back, my hand trembling around Luca's. I had planned to walk out quietly, head high, no scene. Just one more scar to carry in silence. But Callum's words stopped me cold. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, whispers spreading like wildfire. Vivian stiffened, her perfect bridal smile cracking, while my mother's lips pressed into a thin line of irritation. Callum straightened, his voice cutting sharper now. "I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened. I won't sit here and let cruelty be dressed up as comedy." The air thinned. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes swinging between him, Vivian, my mother, and me. My heart thudded so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I wasn't used to this someone else standing up not for themselves but for me. He walked forward slowly, deliberately, each step loud against the polished floor. When he reached our table, he didn't look at me right away. He looked out at the crowd, scanning them with eyes that demanded accountability. "I've heard so much about this family," he said. "About loyalty, about tradition, about appearances. But what I just witnessed wasn't family. That was mockery. That was shame paraded as entertainment." Some guests looked down at their plates. Others fidgeted with glasses, unable to meet his eyes. My grandfather stared at his hands, pale and shaking. My cousin smirked nervously at her phone, as though recording this would somehow make sense of it. No one spoke. Then Callum turned toward Vivian. His voice was still calm, but there was steel beneath it. "You mocked your sister for being a single mother. You turned her life, her strength, into the punchline of a joke, and you forced her son to sit here and hear it." Vivian's cheeks flushed red under the makeup. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her hands trembled against her champagne glass. Callum didn't stop. He pressed on each word, heavier than the last. "She didn't ask to be put in this position. She came here to honor you. She smiled, she clapped, she showed up when she could have stayed home. She brought her boy so he could see what family is supposed to look like. And you," he paused, his eyes locking on Vivian, "you turned her into a spectacle." The silence was suffocating. I sat frozen, clutching Luca's small hand. My breath caught in my throat. I had imagined so many ways this night might go awkward. Smiles, whispered gossip, polite exclusion, but never this. Never someone ripping through the polished veneer to say out loud what I had carried in silence for years. He turned back to the room, his voice rising now. "Lara didn't stand here demanding sympathy. She didn't ask for applause or pity. She's lived without those things. But I won't stay silent, because if this is the family I'm supposed to marry into, one that applauds cruelty, that mistakes humiliation for humor, then I need to reconsider the kind of man I want to be." Gasps rippled through the hall. Someone dropped a fork, the sound ringing like a bell. A woman whispered, "Is this real?" as though she couldn't believe the fairy tale was cracking in real time. Vivian looked stricken, her perfect posture sagging for the first time I had ever seen. My mother's face twisted in fury, but her words failed her. The power she usually wielded so effortlessly had dissolved. And then Callum did something that made the world tilt on its axis. He bent down slightly, his eyes meeting Luca's. His voice softened, but it carried weight, a truth that could never be erased. "Your mom," he said gently, "is the strongest person in this room. Don't you ever forget that." Luca's wide eyes blinked up at him, and I felt my chest tighten. That was the moment. Not the speech, not the confrontation, but that sentence spoken directly into my son's soul. He would carry it long after the wedding lights dimmed. Then Callum turned back, set the microphone down with finality, and without another word walked out of the hall. Past Vivian. Past the stunned guests. Past the fairy tale that had shattered like glass. The room froze. No clapping, no music, no laughter, just silence thick and heavy. I sat there trembling, still gripping Luca's hand. For once I wasn't the one left broken. The fairy lights overhead flickered softly, but the room felt darker than ever. No one moved. No one dared to. The only sounds were the faint hum of the air conditioner and the clink of a spoon hitting glass somewhere near the back. Vivian stood frozen at the head table. Her bridal glow dimmed her posture, no longer flawless. Her eyes darted around the room, searching desperately for approval for someone to laugh again and reset the moment. But the spell had broken. For the first time in my life, I saw my sister small. Not radiant, not adored, just human. My mother was the first to break the silence, her chair scraping loudly as she stood. "What an ungrateful boy," she snapped, her voice sharp but oddly powerless. "He embarrassed you in front of everyone. Typical, just like your sister's selfish." Normally, her words would have pierced me, each syllable a dart aimed at the fragile parts of me I still carried. But not this time. This time her voice fell flat. The room didn't bend to her. People didn't chuckle at her cruelty. They just shifted uncomfortably, eyes down, as though they were suddenly seeing her clearly for the first time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. For once, silence was my weapon, not my shame. I turned to Luca. His small hand clutched mine, his brown eyes wide and searching. "Are we leaving?" he whispered. "Yes, baby," I said softly, brushing a curl from his forehead. "We're going home." I rose slowly, my legs steady now, no longer trembling. As I walked toward the exit, people parted without a word. Some avoided my gaze, others looked like they wanted to say something but couldn't find the courage. The shame they had wanted to pile on me now hung around their own necks, heavy and undeniable. Halfway to the door, I heard my name, Lara. I turned. My grandfather Norman was standing, his pale eyes rimmed red. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. He took a shaky step toward me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice cracking. "I should have stopped it years ago." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. I didn't hate him. I didn't blame him. I knew what silence cost. I had lived it. But I wasn't carrying that weight for anyone else anymore. Outside, the night air wrapped around us, cool and crisp. Lucas squeezed my hand. "Is the wedding over?" he asked, his voice tentative. "Yes," I said, smiling faintly as I looked down at him. "I think it ended exactly how it needed to." We walked to the car without looking back. For the first time, leaving didn't feel like defeat. It felt like freedom. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing relentlessly. Missed calls, unknown numbers, distant cousins, even messages from people I barely knew. I ignored them all until one text caught my eye. Someone recorded Callum's speech. "It's on Facebook. Already has over 50,000 views. You need to see the comments." I hesitated before opening the link. And there it was. Callum standing tall, his voice cutting through the noise, defending me in front of everyone. And there I was, frozen in the frame, holding Luca's hand. The comments scrolled endlessly. "This man is a hero. She deserved better. I'm crying watching this. Every single mom out there just got a little justice." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there still, like something deep inside me had finally unclenched after years of being wound tight. Vivian, of course, tried to spin it. She told anyone who would listen that Callum overreacted, that people were being too sensitive, that it was just a joke. But the truth had already landed, and no one was laughing anymore. A few days later, a small bouquet of wildflowers appeared at my apartment door. No note. Just a little card with 3 words written in careful script: "To the lioness." I didn't need to ask who it was from. The bouquet sat on my kitchen counter for days, its colors bright against the dull linoleum, a quiet reminder that something had shifted. Not just in that wedding hall, but inside me. For once, I wasn't carrying the shame. I wasn't the one who had to apologize or pretend. The weight I had been dragging for years felt lighter, as though someone had finally lifted the edge and shown me I wasn't alone in holding it. The wedding itself quickly unraveled. Within a week, the news spread that Vivian and Callum had called off the engagement. No joint statement, no explanations, no carefully crafted social media posts. Just silence. The photos from that night vanished from her feed, as though erasing the evidence could undo what had happened. She didn't reach out to me. Honestly, I didn't expect her to. My mother called once. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was, but to tell me I had embarrassed the family by not laughing along, by not playing the part of the joke. I listened for 30 seconds before finally saying the words I had swallowed for decades. I'm not your scapegoat anymore. Then I hung up. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was clean. Final. For the first time, I realized I didn't need a grand apology from them. I didn't need them to see my worth. I just needed to stop waiting for their permission to see it in myself. Life didn't transform overnight. I still worked 2 jobs. I still came home some nights too tired to cook anything more than grilled cheese. Luca still begged for pancakes when I craved something green. But I carried myself differently. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I wasn't hiding at the back of the room praying not to be noticed. And Luca, he changed too. He asked more questions now, harder ones. Why are people cruel? Why do some stay silent when they know it's wrong? Why do others speak up? He talked about Callum like he was a Marvel hero, sometimes even lining up his action figures to reenact the speech, standing one brave soldier against a crowd of plastic faces. I would watch him, my heart aching and swelling at the same time, knowing he had witnessed something that night that would shape the man he'd become, strong, gentle, unafraid to stand when it mattered. One evening, while brushing his teeth, he looked up at me in the mirror, toothpaste on his chin, eyes serious. Mom, are you still sad about what Aunt Vivian said? I paused, toothbrush in hand, then shook my head. Not anymore. Why? He shrugged. Because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight. His words settled into me like truth I'd been waiting to hear. He was right. I hadn't yelled back. I hadn't demanded justice. I hadn't thrown my pain at anyone. I had simply stood up, taken his hand, and walked away. And someone else, someone unexpected, had decided that silence wasn't good enough anymore. Callum hadn't just stood up for me. He reminded that room, and maybe even the world beyond it, what real love looks like. Not the kind that wears a tuxedo or walks down an aisle. The kind that sees someone being hurt and says no. Not today. 6 months have passed since that night. I still work long hours, I still balance bills with care, but something inside me is unshakable now. I don't measure myself against Vivian's perfection or my mother's impossible standards. I don't wait for approval that will never come. I have Luca, I have my dignity, and I have a quiet strength that no one can strip away again. If I've learned anything, it's this: being alone doesn't mean you're unwanted. Being kind doesn't make you weak. And dignity once reclaimed is yours forever. So no, I didn't dance at my sister's wedding. I didn't catch the bouquet or cry happy tears under fairy lights. But I left with something better. I left with my son's hand in mine, my head high, and the deep certainty that I no longer owe anyone an explanation for who I am. That was the ending no one expected, and exactly the one I deserved. If this story touched you, if you've ever been mocked, silenced, or made to feel small in a room where you should have been safe, know this: you are not alone. Your voice matters. Your dignity matters. And one day you will find the strength to stand tall again. Please, if this story resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment below. I'd love to know, have you ever had someone finally stand up for you, or the moment you stood up for yourself? And if you want to hear more true stories that cut deep, reveal hidden truths, and remind us what it means to be human, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss what comes next. Thank you for being here.